Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy library lunch hour. I'm coming to you live from the Centro Library Stacks, your friendly neighborhood librarian here to bring to you all today a little bit of information about what new books we've purchased for our library collection, and a little bit of an unboxing for everyone here today. So I'm going to get started right away because we have a lot of books to get through. And the first one from my stack of books here, I'm going to try to get it. This title is Abstract Barrios, The Crisis of Latinx Visibility in Cities by Joana Lodoño. And in Abstract Barrios, Joana Lodoño examines how Latinized urban landscapes are made palatable for white Americans. Such Latinized urban landscapes, she observes, especially appear when whites feel threatened by concentrations of Latinx populations, commonly known as barrios. Drawing on archival research, interviews, and visual analysis of barrio-built environments, Lodoño shows how over the past 70 years, urban planners, architects, designers, policymakers, business owners, and other brokers took abstracted elements from barrio design, such as spatial layouts or bright colors, to safely Latinize cities and manage a long-standing urban crisis of Latinx belonging. The built environments that resulted ranged from idealized notions of authentic Puerto Rican culture in the interior design of New York City's public housing in the 1950s, which sought to diminish concerns over Puerto Rican settlement. And as I go presenting these, my colleagues in the chat will be providing links where you can learn more about the book. And if there's also social media channels for the authors if you want to reach out to the authors on their social media. All right, the next one is this, and you'll get to see a variety of different subject areas that we have in our collection. And so the next one is Agrarian Puerto Rico, Reconsidering Rural Economy and Society, 1899 through 1940. And this is by Cesar J. Ayala and Laird W. Burgad. Fundamental tenets of colonial historiography are challenged by showing that U.S. capital investment into this colony did not lead to the disappearance of the small farmer. Contrary to well-established narratives, quantitative data show that the increasing integration of rural producers within the U.S. market led to differential outcomes, depending on pre-existing land tenure structures, capital requirements to initiate production, and demographics. These new data suggest that the colonial economy was not polarized into landless Puerto Rican rural workers on one side and corporate US capitalists on the other. The persistence of Puerto Rican small farmers in some regions and the expansion of local property ownership and production disprove this socioeconomic model. So here we go. For those of you interested in books about the agricultural economy in Puerto Rico during this era, there you go. This one's a little bit for anyone who's a bird watcher or a birder. We have Birds of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. This is the fully revised and updated third edition by Herbert Raphael. This portable and informative field guide describes the bird species found on Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. It presents all 347 species, both naturally occurring as well as introduced, and highlights 19 endemic species found nowhere else in the world. Species are sorted by habitat to facilitate identification, and extra illustrations are provided for birds in similar appearance. There we go. For all you birders out there, we're gonna go take a trip to Puerto Rico, spy on some birds. There you go. Next title is Boom and Bust in Puerto Rico. This is by A.W. Maldonado. Who is to blame for the economic and political crisis in Puerto Rico, the United States or Puerto Rico? This book provides a fascinating historical perspective on the problem and an unequivocal answer on who is to blame. Journalist A.W. Maldonado charts the rise and fall of the Puerto Rican economy and explains how a litany of bad political and fiscal policy decisions in Washington and Puerto Rico destroyed an economic miracle. Again, that's Boom and Bust by A.W. Maldonado. As you can see, we have a little bit of everything. So we got some stuff for you nature lovers, material for people interested in research on a variety of topics. Our next one, right here, Caribenos at the Table, How Migration, Health, and Race Intersect in New York City. This is by Melissa Fuster. People in Hispanic Caribbean communities in the United States present high rates of obesity, diabetes, and other diet-related diseases, conditions painfully highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic. Both eaters and dietitians may blame these diseases on the shedding of traditional diets in favor of highly processed foods, or conversely, they may blame these on traditional diets of fatty meat, starchy root vegetables, and rice. Applying a much-needed intersectional approach, Fuster shows that nutritionists and eaters often misrepresent and even racialize or pathologize a cuisine's healthfulness or unhealthfulness if they overlook the kinds of economic and racial inequities that exist within the global migration experience. This next one, Colonial Debts by Rocio Zambrana, The Case of Puerto Rico. With the largest municipal debt in US history and a major hurricane that destroyed much of the archipelago's infrastructure, Puerto Rico has emerged as a key site for the exploration of neoliberalism and disaster capitalism. In Colonial Debts, Rocio Zambrana develops the concept of neoliberal coloniality in light of Puerto Rico's debt crisis. Drawing on decolonial thought and praxis, Zambrana shows how debt functions as an apparatus of predation that transforms how neoliberalism operates. Debt functions as a form of coloniality, intensifying race, gender, and class hierarchies in ways that threaten the strength of colonial relationships between Puerto Rico and the United States. Okay. And this one is one that many of you might be familiar with if you attended our charla that Yarimar did with Sharina. And this is, if the cover looks different to you, this is a library edition. So this is Contested Caribbean Indigeneity, Language, Social Practice, and Identity within Puerto Rico Taino Activism by Sharina Feliciano Santos. A Contested Caribbean Indigeneity is an in-depth analysis of the debates surrounding Taino Boricua activism in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean diaspora in New York City. Drawing on an in-depth ethnographic research, media analysis, and historical documents, the book explores the varied experiences and motivations of Taino Boricua activists, as well as the alternative fonts of authority that they draw on to claim what is commonly thought to be an extinct ethnic category. It explores the historical and interactional challenges involved in claiming membership in what for many Puerto Ricans is an impossible affiliation. In focusing on Taino Boricua activism, the book aims to identify a critical space from which to analyze and decolonize ethno-racial ideologies of Puerto Ricanness, issues of class and education, Puerto Rican nationalisms and colonialisms, as well as important questions regarding narrative, historical memory, and belonging. Okay, here's our next one. This one's interesting because this picture is actually from the Centro Archives. It's from the Pura Verde papers. And this is Critical Dialogues in Latinx Studies, a reader. And this is edited by Ana Ramos Zayas and Merida Rua. This book offers a multidisciplinary social science-oriented perspective on Latinx studies, including the social histories and contemporary lives of a diverse range of Latina and Latino populations. The book combines previously published canonical pieces with original cutting-edge works created for this volume. The editors framed the volume around the humanistic social sciences, using the term to highlight the historical and social context under which expressive cultural forms and archival records are created. And now switching gears a little bit, we have this one right here. This is Deuda Natal by Mara Pastor, and this is a translated work. It's translated by Maria Jose Jimenez and Anna Rosenwang. Deuda Natal finds the beauty within vulnerability and dignity amidst precariousness. As one of the most prominent voices in Puerto Rican poetry, Mara Pastor uses the poems in this new bilingual collection to highlight the way that fundamental forms of caring for life and for language can create a space of poetic decolonization. The poems in Deuda Natal propose new ways of understanding as they traverse a thematic landscape of women's labor, the figure of the nomad and the immigrants, and the return from economic exile to confront the catastrophic confluence of disaster and disaster capitalism. This book is winner of the 2020 Ambrosio Prize of the Academy of American Poets. We got next one. Energy Islands. Metaphors of Power, Extractism, and Justice in Puerto Rico. This book is by Catalina M. de Onis. Energy Islands provides an urgent and nuanced portrait of collective action that resists racial capitalism, colonialism, and climate disruption. Weaving together historical and ethnographic research, the story challenges the master narratives of Puerto Rico as a tourist destination and site of natural disasters to demonstrate how fossil fuel economies are inextricably entwined with colonial practices and how local community groups in Puerto Rico have struggled against energy coloniality to mobilize and transform power from the ground up. Let's take a water break. How's everybody liking our book so far? Pretty interesting collection. One of the challenges we had due to the pandemic was that we had to put a pause on purchasing new books. I was working from home and obviously couldn't provide access to library materials. But now that we're back in our library and archive, we can begin purchasing materials again. And I'm working through a backlog of different titles to purchase. This next one, Estamos Bien, La Trienal 2021. And this is edited by the good folks at El Museo del Barrio. This is edited by Elia Alba, Rodrigo Moura, and Susana Temkin. This publication features the work of 42 participating artists and collectives included in this highly anticipated exhibition organized by El Museo. The result of 2 years of research, this project is the museum's first nationwide exhibition and publication exploring the diverse landscape of contemporary Latinx artists working in the United States and Puerto Rico. The volume includes an essay by the curators, a conversation between some of the artists conducted by artist Elia Alba as part of her Supper Club series, and illustrated individual short interviews with the participants. A closing anthology brings together poems and excerpts of essays. This might be one of my favorite new purchases. It just has a little bit of everything. Here's one that is interesting for you educators out there. And this is Folk Stories from the Hills of Puerto Rico. Cuentos folclóricos de las montañas de Puerto Rico. And this is by Rafael Ocasio. And this new anthology gathers together Puerto Rican folk tales that were passed down orally for generations before finally being transcribed beginning in 1914 by the team of famous anthropologist Franz Boas. These charming tales give readers a window into the imaginations and aspirations of Puerto Rico's peasants, the Jíbaro, including a fresh English translation of each folktale, as well as the original Spanish version. The collection also contains an introduction from literary historian Rafael Ocasio that highlights the historical importance of these tales and the Jíbaro cultural values they impart. These vibrant, funny, and poignant stories will give readers unique insights into Puerto Rico's rich cultural heritage. And another one for any parents or younger school educators. And this is A Girl Named Rosita, the story of Rita Moreno, actor, singer, and dancer, and trailblazer. And this is by Anika Aldamuy Denise, and it's illustrated by Leo Espinosa. Pura Belpre honor winner Anika Aldamuy Denise, Planting Stories, and New York Times bestselling illustrator Leo Espinosa, Island-born, tell the story of Rita Moreno, the Puerto Rican superstar best known for her Oscar-winning performance in the original West Side Story film, in this gorgeous picture book biography. When young Rosita moved from Puerto Rico to the mainland United States, she didn't know what to expect, but she knew she loved to sing and dance. Working to overcome the language barrier and bullying she experienced in a strange new country, Rita eventually made her way to Hollywood with a dream to be a star. There, she fought to be seen and heard and eventually reached the pinnacle of success, landing her iconic role in West Side Story and finally winning her groundbreaking Oscar. Let's take a look into this right here. I mean, the art is absolutely beautiful, and it tells a very important story of one of our most famous members of our community. Okay, here's the most recent book I received, and this is called The Lettered Barriada, Workers, Archival Power, and the Politics of Knowledge in Puerto Rico, and it's by Llorel A. Melendez Badillo. In Lettered Barriada, Llorel Melendez Badillo tells the story of how a cluster of self-educated workers burst into Puerto Rico's world of letters and navigated the colonial polity that emerged out of the 1898 US occupation. They did so by asserting themselves as citizens, producers of their own historical narratives, and learned minds. Disregarded by most of Puerto Rico's intellectual elite, these workers engaged in dialogue with international peers and imagined themselves as part of a global community. They also entered the world of politics through the creation of the Socialist Party, which became an electoral force in the first half of the 20th century. Melendez Badillo shows how these workers produced, negotiated, and deployed powerful discourses that eventually shaped Puerto Rico's national mythology. By following these ragtag intellectuals as they became politicians and statesmen, Melendez Badillo also demonstrates how they engaged in racial and gender silencing, epistemic violence, and historical erasures in the fringes of society. Ultimately, The Lettered Barriada is about the politics of knowledge production and the tensions between working class intellectuals and the state. It's really tough getting all these books and not wanting to just sit down and immediately read all of them. So this one's on my to-read list right now. Let's see how many people we have here. Wow, we've got 32 participants. That's fantastic. Thank you everyone for attending today. Our next book is Mi Maria, Surviving the Storm, Voices from Puerto Rico, and this is edited by Ricia Ann Chansky and Marcy Denisiuk. When Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico in September 2017, it left no part of the archipelago unscathed. The hurricane triggered floods and mudslides, washed out roads, and destroyed tens of thousands of homes, farms, and businesses, caused the largest blackout in U.S. history, knocked out communications, led to widespread food, drinking water, and gasoline shortages, and caused thousands of deaths. The 17 oral histories collected in Mi Maria share stories of surviving the storm and its long aftermath as people waited for relief and aid that rarely arrived. Unfortunately, this is another library edition, so the cover isn't that exciting. But this one is The Queer New Eurekan, Racialized Sexualities and Aesthetics in Loisaida. This is by Karen Jaime. The Queer New Eurekan is the first queer genealogy and critical study of the historical, political, and cultural conditions under which the term New Eurekan shifted from a raced ethnic identity marker to New Eurekan, an aesthetic practice. The New Eurekan aesthetic recognizes and includes queer poets and performers of color whose writing and performance build upon the politics inherent in the cafe's founding. Initially situated within the cafe's physical space and countercultural discursive history, the New Eurekan aesthetic extends beyond these gendered and ethnic boundaries, broadening the ethnic marker New Eurekan to include queer, trans, and diasporic performance modalities. And this is from NYU Press, another book that a lot of people are excited to get their hands on right now. Okay, we have another library edition. So the cover is not super exciting, but library editions mean that they last a lot longer when they're on the shelves. Race and Nation in Puerto Rican Folklore, Franz Boas and John Alden Mason in Puerto Rico. And this is by Rafael Ocasio, who published and edited a book that we saw earlier, the one about Puerto Rican folktales. So, Race and Nation in Puerto Rican Folklore, Franz Boas and John Alden Mason in Puerto Rico explores the historic research trip taken to Puerto Rico in 1915 as a component of the Scientific Survey of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. Boas intended to perform field research in the areas of anthropology and ethnography, while other scientists explored the island's natural resources. A young anthropologist working under Boas, John Alden Mason, rescued hundreds of oral folklore samples, ranging from popular songs, poetry, conundrums, sayings, and most particularly, folktales, while documenting native Puerto Rican cultural practices. Through his extensive excursions, Mason came in touch with rural lives of Puerto Rican peasants, the Jibaros, who served as both his cultural informants and writers of the folklore samples. So if you're interested in Puerto Rican folklore, Centro has you covered. Here we have a novel. This is The Taste of Sugar by Maricel Vera. It is 1898, and groups of starving Puerto Ricans, Los Hambrientos, roam the parched countryside and dusty towns begging for food. Under the yoke of Spanish oppression, the Caribbean island is forced to prepare to wage war with the United States. Up in the mountainous coffee region of Utuado, Vicente Vega and Valentina Sanchez labored to keep their small farm from the creditors. When the Spanish-American War and the Great San Ciriaco hurricane of 1899 bring devastating upheaval, the young couple is lured along with thousands of other Puerto Ricanos to the sugar plantations of Hawaii, another US territory, where they are confronted by the hollowness of America's promises of prosperity. So this work of historical fiction is really based on the actual migration patterns that occurred in the early part of the 20th century and late 19th century. And a lot of that is documented here at Centro. Okay, I think we're getting to the bottom of our box. We've got just another couple of books here. And then we can chat a little bit about it. And again, thank you for all 31 participants who are with us today who can't get enough of the Centro Library programming. So here is Translocas, The Politics of Puerto Rican Drag and Trans Performance. This is by Lawrence LaFontaine Stokes. And Translocas focuses on drag and transgender performance and activism in Puerto Rico and its diaspora, arguing for its political potential. Lawrence LaFontaine Stokes explores the social and cultural disruptions caused by Latin American and Latinx locas, the effeminate men, drag queens, transgender performance, and unruly women, and the various forms of violence to which queer individuals in Puerto Rico and the US are subjected. This interdisciplinary autoethnographic queer of color performance studies book explores the lives and work of contemporary performers and activists, including Sylvia Rivera, Nina Flowers, Freddie Mercado, Javier Cardona, Jorge Merced, Erika Lopez, Holly Woodlawn, Monica Beverly Hills, Lady Katiria, and Barbara Herr. Television programs such as RuPaul's Drag Race, films such as Paris is Burning, The Salt Mines, and Mala Mala, and literary works by authors such as Mayra Santos Febres and Manuel Ramos Otero. Lawrence LaFontaine Stokes, a drag performer himself, demonstrates how each destabilizes and sometimes reifies dominant notions of gender and sexuality through drag and their embodied transgender expression. Okay. And last but certainly not least among our unboxing video today is this work. And it is by Raquel Salas Rivera, Ex Exis, Poemas para la Nación, Poems for the Nation. This is a great cover, isn't it? Look at that. Just make a good poster. Okay, so this work by Raquel Salas Rivera writes the poetry of the self split in half, and the X factor is where we might discover our levels of resistance to the body's objectification, sacrifice, and misidentification. Guided by an almost surreal imagery, X Exis teaches us how to write from the silence of captivity with a nuanced bilingualism. The lines in these poems work off Salas Rivera's beautifully decolonized logic and turn until they ultimately construct a nation of truth or cut you until you bleed into a new body. And that was a review by Willy Perdomo of this book of poetry by Raquel Salas Rivera. And those are just 20 of our newest acquisitions. Centro will be purchasing lots more books for our holdings. And we will put in the chat how you can make appointments to view these books, as well as any of the 18,000 books behind me in our library and archive. And if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to put it through the Q&A. We have, does El Centro loan any of these books to the public? Centro is a research library and we are a non-circulating library. So we do not lend out books, but you are more than welcome to use materials here. And we are really useful at helping you find where you can get these books near you at local libraries near you. So we can refer you to other places where you might have access to them. And someone asked, can Aníbal flip through Estamos Bien? Yeah, I think I can pull that off. Hold on, there we go. Rebox some of these books now. So here's Estamos Bien. And let's see if there's anything cool. So here's some photographs of an exhibition. Some plátanos. Some vases. Some photography. And at the end, there's lecturas, different essays. So this seems like a good general interest and artistic interest title for everyone to pick up. And to people who are curious about how we choose the items that we end up purchasing and adding to our collection, there's a lot of different avenues. We get a lot of recommendations from our patrons. So people who are interested in the Puerto Rican studies and who like to interact with our content, they sometimes make recommendations for books that we should purchase. And let's see, we have a question. Can you repeat the review on the poetry book XXX's, please? I did not catch it. Okay, sure. Yeah, I can do that. So the review by Willy Perdomo of Raquel Salas Rivera's book, it's Raquel Salas Rivera writes the poetry of the self split in half. And the X factor is where we might discover our levels of resistance to the body's objectification, sacrifice, and misidentification. Guided by an almost surreal imagery, XXX's teaches us how to write from the silence of captivity with a nuanced bilingualism. The lines in these poems work off Salas Rivera's beautifully decolonized logic and turn until they ultimately construct a nation of truth or cut you until you bleed into a new body. It's a very evocative review. But yeah, if anybody else has any recommendations for books, if there's something that you think you'd like to see in our shelves, it can be a book, it can be a magazine, it can be a DVD or a documentary. And someone's actually sharing a review of the book, I believe the XXX's book. So there's a link in the chat as well. So please feel free to check that out as well. So we receive catalogs, of course, of different new publications from NYU Press and Rutgers Press. I'm subscribed to various listservs for librarians and Latino serving institutions, and there's always lots of great reviews and recommendations that come through there. And we have lots of queries inputted with publishers and book distributors that send a lot of materials relating to Puerto Rico to my inbox, and then I review those. And if I feel they would be good in the collection, they get added to the collection. And in addition to these 20 books, we're going to be continuing to add more materials. Our collection grows by 200 to 350 books a year, depending on the year and depending on what is published. I would say that there's been a lot more interesting material about Hurricane Maria that's being published recently. So that's definitely an area that we're going to be collecting more in. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this list of books and we're going to offer it as a PDF so people can download the PDF later. In case you weren't able to make it to this event, you'll at least have access to this new list of books. And on our webpage, we also advertise the new titles that we acquire. And we encourage you all to email us, make appointments to come visit the library. You can make an appointment, and it can be for a virtual visit as well. You can make an appointment to do a Zoom visit if you want just to have a conversation about any research you're doing or any interest that you have about the Puerto Rican studies. And my colleague Kimberly just put the link in there. If anyone wants to make a virtual Zoom visit or an actual in-person visit, fill out that form. And then you can always email the Centro Librarian at centro.library@hunter.cuny.edu. There you go. You can email me if you have any questions about any of the titles that we've shown off today. And I think that's going to do it for today, unless there are questions. Do you have the documentary Antonia Pantoja Presente available? I believe we do. Please email me that question at centro.library.hunter.cuny.edu so I can verify and get back to you. The one thing we actually do circulate is films, and there's a film loan contract that you can fill out and borrow our movies. But aside from that, thank you everyone for making this a very successful first unboxing video for our library lunch hour. We sent out a survey for what the next library lunch hour should be, since we get a ton of recommendations and requests for different topics. So we sent out an email, a survey, where people can select from one of 4 or 5 topics that they'd like to see covered. So please make sure that you fill out that survey and let us know what you'd like to see. We put a lot of, there you go. And Kimberly's on the ball here today. So she's got the link to vote for the library lunch hour and a link for a feedback form. We really appreciate all that. All of the feedback that we've been getting, it's been phenomenally positive feedback on the programming that we've been doing out of the library here. So we want to continue that, and we want to make it interesting and relevant to what all of our patrons are actually interested in. So we want to respond to your needs and any research questions that you might have. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of your lunch hour. Have a good one.
Before you go anywhere, I want to tell you guys about our next upcoming events. We have one tonight at 6 p.m. Ricardo Alegría Revisited, conversation between Ricardo Alegría's 2 biographers, and you can RSVP for that event here. And then next week, we invite you to join us on the 16th for another Body Mix event at 6 p.m. San Juan Queer, and just the queer population and the queer community in San Juan. And you can RSVP for San Juan Queer here. We also have a Data Hub Coffee Hour where Carlos Vargas will present his findings on New York State and the population changes between 2010 and 2020. You can RSVP for that event right here in the chat. And then we also have on the 23rd, the library lunch hour that Aníbal just spoke about, the Reader's Choice. I sent the form above, but you can RSVP for that library lunch hour here and come see something that you might want to look for yourself. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm having a hard time copying and pasting. Okay, there you go. So yeah, vote for that library lunch hour, and then tune in on the 23rd at 2 p.m. EST. And come check us out. And then on that same day in the evening at 6 p.m., you can come check out another Body Mix event, San Juan, a city on both sides of the wall, where the historic preservation of Puerto Rico will be explored. And you can RSVP there. And we have our final Body Mix event, the Third Foundation of San Juan, on November 30th, also at 6 p.m. And you can RSVP for that event there. Thank you so very much, everyone, for coming. We were so happy to have you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.